Okay, let's continue on with the manual method of shaft cutting. Let's look at the hacksaw. Well, the hacksaw blade can be used to cut steel. I don't recommend it. The smooth chrome surface makes it difficult to cut a nice clean line. Rather, a hacksaw, or I should say hacksaw frame, is a great way to cut graphite or composite shafts. The only difference is the blade. Normal hacksaw blade has teeth where they're serrated along the edges of both sides of the blade. This can easily splinter the fibers, causing breakage at a later time. A special grit edge or rod saw blade is highly recommended, and you can obtain these at your local hardware store or through even a few component distributors. These don't have teeth at all, rather a coarse, gritty material on the cutting edge of the blade. When using one of these items to cut a shaft, it's best to tape a portion of the shaft with masking tape for a couple of reasons. The first, many graphite shafts are black, and the use of the masking tapes assists in properly marking the area you want to cut with a black Sharpie pen. Secondly, by wrapping tape around the shaft, this reduces the likelihood that the shaft could splinter during the cutting process. Whenever cutting graphite shafts manually, these have to be clamped in a padded vise clamp, and you want to avoid clamping too forcefully on the butt end of today's lightweight graphite shafts. Otherwise, there's the possibility of cracking the shaft. One other trick is to start by cutting about halfway through the shaft and then rotating 90 degrees. Then you can continue cutting through the rest of the shaft. If you attempt to cut all the way through the shaft all at once, this really increases the likelihood that the shaft can splinter or delaminate. And with some shafts costing upwards of $300, you don't want to make a costly mistake.
What we're going to do is cut the graphite shaft with by hand with a hacksaw. Actually, we're going to use a special blade called a grit edge blade or a rope saw. What we'll do, we'll put our shaft in a padded vise, clamp it down. The trimming instructions tell us to trim 1 inch for this particular shaft, so I'm going to take my piece of masking tape, put approximately 1 inch from the tip. This does two things. One, a lot of graphite shafts are black, and this helps to see the black mark a lot easier. And second, by taping the shaft, you eliminate splintering when you cut through. So just kind of line up your mark, gradually build up pressure. I like to go about halfway through and then rotate the shaft. This way, I'm not at the very end going to get a splinter when the blade finally goes through. And when we're done, just kind of snap it off and take off your tape, and you're good to go.
Okay. Well, this ends the manual methods. Next up is the Dremel or high-speed rotary tool with an abrasive cutoff wheel. For hobbyists, this tool may already be present in your workshop. It can be used safely to cut virtually any type of shaft. Just make sure to use the appropriate cutoff wheel and the recommended speed for the type of material you'll be cutting. Use very little force to cut through the shaft. It's the grit of the wheel that supplies the cutting action here. Too much pressure can and will break the small cutoff wheels, so keep plenty of those on hand. Most importantly, when working with this type of tool or really any motorized shaft cutting device, wear goggles or safety glasses to protect your eyes. Personally, I almost like the manual methods discussed earlier over the high-speed rotary tool because the small blades are so fragile. If you get into a rush or apply too much pressure, they easily break. And because of this, make sure no one else is around in your immediate area while cutting. Next up is the bench grinder. One of the best methods of cutting shafts for small and medium size shops is an abrasive type metal cutting wheel attached to a bench grinder. It's recommended to use a 3,450 RPM in a minimum of a 1/3 horsepower grinder. This will ensure that the quality of the cut with the abrasive cutoff wheel will be smooth and clean. When selecting an abrasive wheel, choose one that is rated for ferrous metal cutting, as this type of cutoff wheel is designed to last longer when cutting any type of shaft, and Hireko does offer one in our catalog. With an abrasive cutoff wheel, again, very little force is required to cut through the shaft, since it's the grit of the wheel that supplies the cutting action. Abrasive wheels can be used to cut all types of shafts, from steel to titanium to graphite and other composites. Remember to keep the cutting guards on at all times. The abrasive cutoff wheel will be much thinner than the stone grinding wheel it replaces. Therefore, when you go to the local hardware store, purchase several washers to use as spacers. This will help center and securely mount the blade in your grinder. Make sure to check the arbor size, or check the details of your grinder before you go too, so you know which size washers to get. I find it best if you push the shaft about halfway through the blade and then rotate. I think you get a much cleaner cut this way. Many home shops already have a 6-inch bench grinder. If not, they're relatively inexpensive to obtain. The abrasive wheels last a long, long time too. This is perhaps the most cost-effective method of cutting shafts. Now, if you cut a lot of composite shafts, occasionally it helps to cut a steel shaft or even a spare bolt to keep the blade clean. One more thing, shafts that have quite a bit of fiberglass in them, usually lower-cost composites or junior shafts, the blades will tend to wear out quickly, and this is considered normal. Okay. One of the newer options available to club makers is a motorized mini chop saw with an abrasive wheel. You can find these at places like Harbor Freight or a few other club making suppliers, and rather inexpensively. Small to medium-sized shops could use this smaller version of a lever-armed chop saw mounted with an appropriate abrasive cutoff wheel. This is fast and efficient to cut really any type of shaft when you're cutting one shaft at a time. These are an alternative to the bench grinder, as they're portable, especially when bench space is at a premium in your shop. Be aware that these will kick out some dust,